me just break something apart right now really quickly. If you have a trauma bond with somebody, that is not a positive thing. But if you don't understand what a trauma bond is, that might be why you think having a trauma bond with somebody is a positive thing. If you are having a conversation with somebody and you're sharing something traumatic that has happened to you, and then they also share something that is traumatic that happened to them, you might be bonding over trauma, but that is not a trauma bond. A trauma bond is something that happens in abusive relationships. It's not a positive thing. A trauma bond is formed between an abuser and their victim when the abuser is doing both abusive things and they're also doing very nice and kind things as well. This makes it really confusing for the victim. This tactic is used by people that have narcissistic personality disorder, but this is just generally a toxic trait of abusers. What happens is the abuser does some sort of abuse to the victim. It could be physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, all kinds of different ways that in which someone can abuse you. And the abuse is probably pretty traumatizing. But then the abuser follows that up, maybe not immediately. This could be several hours later, several days later, several weeks, or even months later. But then the abuser follows up this abuse that is happening with something that doesn't feel like abuse, something that actually feels loving, something that actually makes the victim feel like, oh, this person does actually love me, and that was just a mistake on their part. It was just an oversight. And then this happens consistently. This is not just a one-off thing. So constantly the abuser is some sort of abuse on their victim, and then they come back around and then they're nice and kind and loving. So basically they are hurting and they are healing the victim pretty much at the same time. It goes back and forth and back and forth. This is very confusing for the victim. And it makes it really hard for the victim to see clearly about, is this actually abusive? Does this person love me? Do they maybe not love me? Like, it doesn't make sense that they don't love me because they tell me they love me, but then they do all these terrible things to me. So then the victim stays around longer and longer and longer, and that trauma bond gets even tighter. It is a tactic that abusers use to keep their victims in lockstep with them. Basically prevents the victim from leaving because they're so confused and they're so traumatized, and they start thinking, well, I'm the problem. If I just stopped saying these things, or if I just stopped acting that way, if I stopped dressing that way, if I stopped seeing this person, if I stopped doing that, then this person would just be that loving person all the time. And that will never happen. And certainly the abuser might share with their victim ways that they were abused in their past, because they likely were. In order to become the abusive person they are today, they probably had some sort of abuse inflicted upon them at some point. And they will share that abuse with their victims to try to garner some sort of sympathy for why they are treating the victim the way in which they are. The victim starts feeling sorry for them, and well, I feel so bad because he's been through so much. And next thing you know, that victim is in that relationship. They've been isolated. They've been really abused for a long period of time. Their self-esteem hits the floor. Just remember, you do not have to be a martyr for someone who is abusive. Once people become grown-ass adults, they are responsible for their own behaviors and addressing the crap that may have happened to them in their past without it damaging other people. Just be really careful of forming that trauma bond with somebody, or at least realizing that that's what's happened, and then determining, therefore, what should you do.